Right, thank you, Natasha. Thank you, Gemma. Thank you, Helen. That has set the scene for an important question. So we've heard about the change, we've heard about the state of things. So how do we take that evidence and use it in order to execute action? And that's going to be the focus of this session. So the speakers are going to present to us around the UK perspective on the recently launched OSPAR Quality Status Report for the North West Atlantic. Some of the pollution challenges there that we face, and the role of the UK marine strategy to protect and to recover the state of our seas. Just a quick reminder for those people online and for people in the room, you can use Slido to post questions. There will be a Q&A panel session at the end, so do make use of that. And of course, for those in the room, there will also be the roving mics. So first of all, it's my pleasure to introduce Dominic Pattinson, the Executive Secretary of OSPAR, who's going to talk about the evidence need for the Northwest Atlantic region.
Thanks, Guy. You can't see anything here with the lights, but hello, everyone. Really nice to see some familiar faces already, and thank you very much for inviting me back to Coastal Futures. I used to be a regular attendee when I was at DEFRA, where I used to work with Gemma Harper. And I mean, first of all, thanks to Helen and Gemma. What a fantastic sort of opening couple of presentations, really inspiring. And I still go around crossing out the S at the end of oceans, following what Gemma used to tell me. So those that don't know me, I'm Dominic Pattinson. I'm, as Dave said, I'm the Executive Secretary at OSPAR. Used to work at DEFRA on marine issues. I'm going to talk a little bit about the Quality Status Report that OSPAR produced last year, or published last year in 2023. And it's a bit of a double act with Christina because there's so much to get through. We thought we'd spread it out over a couple of presentations. I'll focus on the sort of pressures side of things. And and then Christine will pick up on the biodiversity issues. So that was my first slide. So our next slide, just in case people don't know what OSPAR is, because the name doesn't really help, it comes from the Oslo-Paris Convention. So they merged back in 1998. We're the Regional Sea Convention for the Northeast Atlantic. So you can see the extent of our geographical coverage there. We go all the way from the North Pole down to the sort of Canary Islands, Spain and Portugal, and out, importantly for us, out to the middle of the Atlantic. So we have a huge area of areas beyond national jurisdiction. And in that respect, OSPAR is it's not unique, but it's probably the Regional Sea Convention with one of the largest areas beyond national jurisdiction, which allows us to take measures in areas where, allows us to take measures in those areas where countries can't. We're very much consensus-based, so we work with our 16 contracting parties. You can see the flags across the bottom there. And it's a convention, it's a legally binding convention. So those countries have a legal obligation to deliver that convention. And that convention requires them to take action to protect and conserve the Northeast Atlantic whilst using it sustainably. So it's really important. So the decisions taken at OSPAR do matter and do, as I'll come on to show, hopefully, add value to what happens at the sort of national and UK level. So just turning now to the Quality Status Report. These are once-in-a-decade assessments, huge pieces of work, and I know there are some people here who have been involved in those assessments, and huge thank you to those people and to all of the experts across all of our contracting parties. We really couldn't do it without the very, very long hours that some of you, including Christina and Abigail, who I know is in the room, put into doing these assessments, and I'm sure there are others as well. So huge thank you, and I always try and make that point at the beginning of my presentations about this, because it really is a massive effort. You can see that sort of the structure there. We've got a synthesis report, they're underpinned by, I think it's 15 thematic assessments that bring together birds, marine mammals, oil and gas industry, things like that, into thematic assessments, a bit of an in-depth look. And overall, it provides a health check of the state of the Northeast Atlantic. And I would say that it's the most authoritative and the most comprehensive assessment, and because we published it recently, the most up-to-date assessment of the status of the Northeast Atlantic. And I'm going to sort of try and show some of the results of that the QSR has delivered. So before I go into that, I think we heard, I think it was from Gemma, about the cumulative effects and how important that is. And so hang on a second, I think I may have missed a slide. Maybe there's a slide missing there. So I'll go back, and there's a slide on the what we call the sort of DAPSIR approach. So this is the drivers, activities, pressures, state, impact, response approach. And we framed all of our thematic assessments around this structure because we want to better understand how those drivers, how human activities, what we need, what humans need, is driving the activities that take place in the sea that then create pressures, that has an impact on state, and then what those impacts are on ecosystem services. And then the response to that is, what are we doing about those changes? So apologies, there should be a slide there. Based on that, we, as Gemma said, the importance of the cumulative effects of what's going on in the sea is really important at the moment. We're constantly hearing about the pressures of the increase in renewable energy expansion, pressures that's putting on where fishing can take place, the expansion of the oil and gas industry, all of that coming together. If we don't understand how those pressures are interacting, we'll never sort of be able to develop the sort of the measures that we need to address those pressures and impacts. So one of the things that OSPAR's done in its quality status report is develop these things. They're Sankey diagrams, is what they're called. And really what they're doing is they're trying, if you go from left to right, trying to assess the impact of the drivers, the activities, the pressures. And the interactive version of this is if you sort of hover over those pressures, it will show you which are the ones that are having the biggest impact. And the whole idea of that is so that we can focus our efforts on those areas that are having the biggest impact on the state of the marine environment. I think we'd be the first to say that we haven't cracked this yet. It's still work in progress. But at the same time, I think we, as a Regional Sea Convention, are pretty far advanced in this thinking and leading the way. So what are the results? And I think Helen's presentation was really good. It kind of said that actually where we do take measures, we do make a difference. And that's the optimism, that's the hope, that when we take sort of well-targeted measures, it makes a difference. And this slide is a collection of sort of some of the thematic assessments that we undertook in the QSR, and where we've taken measures on radioactive substances. We've prevented pollution, so there isn't pollution from radioactive substances in the sea. Oil and gas measures, we've significantly reduced the pollution that's coming from the oil and gas industry. The slide with the bar graphs, I can't see anything on these slides, but anyway, the slide with the bar graphs is similar to the one that Ellen showed about the sort of heavy metals, and you can see where we ban things, you get less in the sea, and it works. So, we can do things. The map, the green map in the corner, I didn't have space to sort of include all of the maps, so that's our eutrophication map. And I think if you go back to the 2001, half of it's red, and now we're showing that it's all green. I mean, we haven't solved these issues. There are still problem areas, but we are making progress. And I think this is the optimism side of things. I'll let Christina tell you about the bad stuff. This is the good stuff. We can work collectively, and I think, and I would say this, wouldn't I? Working at that regional sea scale really helps in addressing these issues because it's the sea. It's transboundary effects. You've got to work at that scale. Oh. Sorry. A bit more stuff, litter, noise, Again, we're getting much, much better at monitoring these things. On litter, we've seen some positive benefits. Our beach litter monitoring showed statistically significant reductions in the amount of litter found on beaches. We're getting much, much better at assessing noise, which has become really important as we see the increase in offshore renewable work. But again, there's more to do. You know, I'm not trying to say that we've cracked it by any means, but we are getting better at it, and we're getting the monitoring and data to support those decisions. A couple of references again in the earlier presentations about climate change and ocean acidification, highlighting here really that this is the first time that OSPAR's QSR did a sort of dedicated assessment on climate change and ocean acidification, and you know, we know the evidence, we know what it's telling us, but we're getting better at explaining it, and we're doing it at our scale so that we can design those measures more effectively. So what happens next? And I think this is the sort of the interesting bit. So I think Gemma and Helen both talked about optimism and hope, and what do we and how do we use the evidence to go forward? So obviously, there are still gaps and knowledge that we need to fill, so the QSR will help us identify what those are, what needs to be done. But we're very much, or we like to think that we're very much an evidence-based organisation. And so what we think we've got now, and what I think we've got now, is we've got the evidence. We've got evidence that's telling us that we need to do more, that the measures that we've put in place are good, but they're not as good as they need to be. We, in OSPAR, we have ministerial meetings every few years. We've got another one coming up in 2025. And the QSR will give us the evidence to present to ministers from across all of our 16 contracting parties, including the EU. So it's a really good opportunity to influence EU policy thinking as well. And try and secure that political commitment to taking more action to address the problems facing the sea. So that's how we'll be using this evidence. We'll be reviewing it, looking at what we need to do more of in our strategy. So what is the evidence telling us about the North Sea? I think when I was writing my notes for this, I was thinking it's given us the evidence, but it's kind of not it's not really the results we want. Yeah, oh, sorry. I can't see you in the dark, so you can keep waving as much as you want. But this is the last slide. Sorry, but this is an important one. So we've got the results now, but they're not great results. There are examples of where things are working and that, but we need to do more. And this overriding message is that cumulatively, you know, it's not enough. So we need to look at what we're doing. Is it just ocean acidification, climate change? Is it just that cocktail of chemicals that are happening in the sea? So we've got the evidence. Let's try and get the political will to take more measures, more effective measures going forward. Thank you very much. Sorry for going over time.
Thank you very much, Dominic. Excellent bit of scene setting around OSPAR there, and I suspect most people in the room understood a lot of that detail, but that was a lovely bit of insight into that treaty. So Dominic referred to the assessment report there. Christina Herbon from JNCC is one of the co-authors of that report, and she's going to share some of the not so optimistic findings, I suspect, following on from Dominic. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much, everybody. It's just great when they put you on the spot to give everybody bad news. So for the next 10 minutes, I am going to take you a bit deeper on some of the results of the biodiversity that is available through the QSR. What are the challenges that we are funding, and what are the actions that we are thinking to develop further? So as Dominic was saying, we have these thematic assessments. For biodiversity, we have 6 components, as you can see there, alongside assessments from threatened and declining habitats and species that are those that have been identified by countries in need of priority protection, and other information such as the OSPAR MPA network. So I'm going to show you some of the examples from these 4. All the biodiversity assessments were calculated using a set of indicators and in some cases integrated assessments. So as you can see, here is the example from the marine birds. The legend, I think, is quite easy to understand. Everything that is grey out means no sufficient data was available to undertake an assessment. When it's brown color means bad, and when it's green means good. So marine birds, good status was achieved, but grazing feeding birds. But however, all the other functional groups, as you can see there, the ones where data was available as being seen as red. So they are not in good status, in particular in the regions around the UK. From the threatened and declining, populations were assessed on 9 of the species, and 5 out of 9 are shown still to be declining. Key pressures, pre-depletion, injuries, extractions, disturbance of species, some of them in particular prey availability driven by climate change, but human activities very much at the core of these issues. And I would like to remind everybody that because of the timing of the QSR, avian flu hasn't been included into these results, which will put additional pressures to population already under crisis. Marine mammals, the legend, similar code. From the assessments is telling us that grey seals are doing well, but overall harbor seals and other cetaceans, they're not doing that good. There are some areas where some of the scans and other monitoring was not in time for running the QSR, but you can see that the picture is not good overall. Threatening and declining species populations were evaluated for these 4 species that you can see there. And from the northern right well, we have concluded that the population has now been eliminated from the Northeast Atlantic, which is not really good news. Key pressures, bycatch. Incidental bycatch is the main one. But also noise, plastic pollution, hazardous substances, impacts from a series of chemicals also causing a decline on the populations. Benthic habitats integrated assessments was not possible because of the complexity of the benthic indicators. We have 6 indicators. Here is the example from physical disturbance. So the interpretation of this is the darkest, this is the pink, the highest is the level of disturbance on this assessment unit. As you can see there, overall, the conclusion was benthic is not doing very well at the moment. We have evaluated 18 threatened and declining habitats, and in the bottom of the slide, you can see some examples there. From these 18, only 1 is in good. All the other 18 are bad or declining. There has key pressures that we analyzed with the indicators was physical disturbance, habitat loss, impact from nutrients and other contaminants, changes on benthic diversity, and changes on ecosystem function. We have also identified that there is an increasing concerns of climate change and ocean acidification putting additional pressure. Some improvement has been measured in coastal habitats, so this shows that we actually, when things are put in place, improvements can be measured. Pelagic habitats, I'm afraid, very much the same kind of results. Over the past 60 years, we have measured changes on pelagic habitats. The results from the QSR are showcasing this general pattern of decrease, phytoplankton and zooplankton. Climatic change, one of the main drivers, but also being exacerbated in some cases by local pressure from human activities. So pelagic habitats, the overall assessment is they are not good either. And this is important from the environment, but it has consequences for ecosystem services. So this is one of the results that you can see there, what is available through QSR, where we have identified what are the key ecosystem services that they are being affected by these failures, by these declines, by these trends, this continued degradation. And the example from Benthic Habitats conclusion, strong negative impacts on services such as water and sediment regulation, biotic provisioning, and others. So it's a way of OSPAR to flag up that there is consequences for nature, there is consequences for us too. There are some bright spots. I needed to put that just to balance a little bit the message. So Dominic took all the good news, but I just wanted to flag up that when we work together, good things happen. When people take action, the data, the results, things positive happen. So there has been improvement in hazardous substances, as you can see in the bottom of the screen. There is a reduction in nutrients. Marine litter is the ratio of is steadily reducing, and marine protected areas. Now over 10% of the OSPAR marine waters are designated. So things would happen, but more action is needed. So yes, we have done progress, but it's still too much contaminants, too much hazardous substance into the water. And there is increasing pressure from new activities, such as those from the noise. Biological, you can see the results. They all give it the same kind of message. Things are not doing very well. So there is a species trend decline, and habitats continue being degraded. And climate change, ocean acidification are major drivers of change, and we don't really understand interactions between that and existing pressures. The Northeast Atlantic is something that OSPAR contracted parties has agreed to these issues, these challenges, in order to just change the trajectory and to put actions into the ground. This is one of the examples that we are developing at the moment, a regional action plans to address the challenge that has been raised in the QSR to improve the status and reduce impacts. We know the current measures are not sufficient, something else needs to be done. And we are doing a review of existing measures and what are the gaps, what necessary actions, regional, sub-regional actions need to be put in place. So it's about working together, working in collaboration to identify those actions. In the UK, we are using the information from the QSR for the UK Marine Strategy to understand what this means in terms of UK good ecological status. This data and evidence is also being used for other national strategies like the Environmental Improvement Plan and Biodiversity Conservation Plans, and also to inform research and projects, just to bring data, put data into action, just to identify actually what we need to do to change this constant trajectory of decline. And my final thank you is, obviously, I haven't done this all in my own. There is a huge amount of people involved, and this is just a few names of some of the UK leads I have been working with in this work area, but also experts across OSPAR, across the 16 contracted parties, and UK experts, UK agency, who have working together in this huge piece of work. Excellent. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Christina. So I think that's given us some stark context in terms of what the evidence is telling us. To plagiarise Gemma's talk title, what the call of the ocean actually is. I think Bob now is going to reflect, this is Bob Earll, and Bob is going to reflect upon sort of annual change at that regional scale, and importantly, that building of social capital.
Thank you.
Over to you, Bob.
Well, good morning, everyone, and thank you for inviting me to speak on this. And Natasha's got some track record on this because she was involved in Southwest Marine Ecosystems, running it for 2 or 3 or 4 years. I thought I'd passed it on nicely. I think yesterday morning we were encouraged to share various of our kind of personal details, but I have to say that when I was in the 6th form, I sat up there, okay, 1965. and I was a naughty boy. You know, we were all up there, and we came to a lecture here on explosives, and it was just amazing. I didn't think then that I'd be here now, and I'm going to reflect on one or two things going back in a second, perhaps in the questions. Anyway, so you've heard about the QSR and the long timescale changes. My talk today is about reporting annual change on a regional scale. And yes, Dominic, my region is much smaller than your region. That was always good to talk to people, you know, before the meeting. And building social capital, but actually, as someone, Paul Naylor in our group says, communities and relationships is much better. I think Sarah pointed out the other day that I hadn't quite understood social capital, but let's kind of move on. But in essence, I'm going to be talking about the social dynamics, and I'll explain the rather unsubtle way that we look at it. And I'm also going to flag for any of you who are actively working in the East MMO region, okay, that I want you to put your hands up a little while, so think about this, if you work on an area in Flamborough Head to the South Suffolk border, I want you to put your hands up because I want you to take some action. Okay, so why annual reporting? You can read the list. There are two reasons really, and I'll explain where this has come from in a second or two. The reality is we can't actually wait for 5 or 6 years before we act. Stuff happens, the reality is the reality of it. And all sorts of scientists, whether they're professional, highly qualified scientists who know everything about that particular topic, or whether they're citizen scientists, actually do stuff on an annual basis. Helen talked about the bathing water information that comes out annually. We don't have to wait for 5 or 6 years before we get another document telling us there's a problem. So you've seen these other issues there. So the second point there, we can report things annually, and we often do. And so what I'm going to talking about today is essentially capturing that idea. Now, I know, because I've talked to a number of you here, that you haven't heard of Southwest Marine Ecosystems, okay? Southwest Marine Ecosystems, or as Roger Proudfoot calls it, SWIMMY for short, okay? It's going to have an East Coast version, which is called East Marine Ecosystems. The ecosystems bit is important because it actually brings all these things together. And in that process, and you see the map of these topics in the slide, we cover a number of thematic topics, and a number of these thematic topics are, of course, won't come as any surprise to you because they're almost exactly the same as thematic topics covered by the UK Marine Strategy. Okay? It was blissful to watch that. Well, in fact, Abigail put the slide together where we had the Southwest Marine Ecosystem topics and the UK Marine Strategy topics, and apart from sound, which we don't cover, they're very similar. Now, if you get into, I'm going to talk about the social dynamics and these two other circles and diagrams in the bottom, but you can see that the thematic topics we cover, oceanography, plankton, are the sorts of things that you've already seen this morning from the QSR. If you get into this business, you're into good news and bad news, okay? And if you hear about it year on year on year, you get a sense of what is going on. You get a sense that the plankton communities are changing. There are new norms for the plankton communities. Obviously, people are talking about the bluefin tuna, but for anyone from the southwest, they've known about this for the last 10 years. It's gone from being an amazing experience. If you're on a paddleboard and a bluefin tuna jumps out of the water in front of you, Christ, anyway, it's very amazing. But then the scientists came along and did mark recapture stuff on the bluefin tuna, and then when there was a quota for it, and there was a 40-ton quota for it. So lots of people in the southwest. So over that kind of period of 10 years, God knows how many strategy cycles that was, it's gone from being a novelty to being something that's actually fundamentally really rather important. We know that peregrine falcons like eating kittiwake chicks. And in fact, if you've got a peregrine falcon on a cliff next to your kittiwake chicks, then you won't have any kittiwake chicks. But the peregrine falcons will do really well. And so will ravens. Because if you have a raven's nest on the kittiwake cliff, they'll do very well too. So there are some interesting dynamics you get to hear about. And you also spot things that are coming over the horizon. So offshore wind is coming very soon. At a regional level, you get to know about the stuff that's happening in a region, a sense of it. So we know that blue sharks, for example, don't cross that Irish Sea front in the summer. Get blue sharks in the southwest, fantastic, and some years they're already amazing. They've been doing really well. Good news. We also know, of course, that most of the Manx shearwaters we see on the southern south coast, right up to Lyme Bay, in their hundreds, fly from the South Wales Islands. So in our, we can put our human governance map of where our regions are, it's all very fine and wonderful. From an actual systems perspective, they don't care a tinker's monkey about where these human boundaries are. They just cruise through them. And the one that cruises through them really the most is the inshore bottlenose dolphin pod of about 30 animals we've studied. Well, it's been studied down there a couple of times now, intensively by citizen science groups. 30 animals. They can swim from Brighton, you know and love just down the road, to Newquay, north coast of Cornwall, in 4 days. And they're spotted all the way down. What makes a group of bottlenose dolphins who are happy off Brighton swim to Newquay in 4 days? If you're into science, kind of PhD or two there. So you get a sense of the region. But why do this on a regional scale? Well, because, the first sentence here is actually from a conversation he had in the summer with DEFRA. DEFRA recognise that there's an issue of translating UK marine strategy to our regional scale, yeah? And that relates to action. But when I was thinking about this slide, I thought to myself, well, hold on a minute. Most of the people who actually do stuff, actually make the difference, are actually at a regional scale. It's the agency staff on the ground who are actually making the difference, who are taking the action. It's the IFCAs and it's the citizen science at that local scale. So there's a really thumping good reason for doing stuff at a regional level is because essentially the people who do it are there. So let's kind of, I've lived with, my wife's a health psychologist. She ran the biggest health psychology department in the country. So I've had social kind of blowing over me my entire sort of married life, which has been, it's I think 52 years now. So, but this is about as unsubtle in relation to social as it's possible to get, okay? Now you, the audience in this diagram, would be a community of interest. You are here because you're interested in the sea. If I were to, 1 minute, yeah. So, excellent, 1 minute, brilliant. So, I'm going to go quickly now. I'm going to point out the community of practice because there are individual groups of you. One of the things we do, I suppose, is also this communication platform. 12 webinars, 1 conference covering these topics, Southwest Annual Seas Report and the press and media work. That focuses into this, and this is a kind of example of what happens when you produce indicators, in effect. It condenses that information down so we can work with people and tell people what's going on. I won't ask the people in the East region to put up their hands because that would take too much time, and I should have actually done it earlier, but there's going to be an East Marine Ecosystems project that's happening. Gemma said we should be brave. Well, we're going to do 10 community of practice meetings in the first 2 weeks of March. That's kind of bravery on my part, if not insanity, but anyway, we'll try it. And there are my conclusions. We can report annually, and we often do. We can communicate that information widely if we wish, if we want. Of course, that's sometimes not done. It makes sense to actually take that regional level information to encourage practical action amongst the people who are actually doing the work. And communities of practice will be the engines that drive that action. Thank you very much.
I have a sense that Bob had a little bit more to say there. So, so line up those questions and let's tease out the bits that you didn't get. And we might get to do the stand up and clap if you're in the East Region bit as well during the Q&A. Now it's a pleasure to hand over to Kayleigh Thomas, who's going to talk to us around the assessment of litter in the UK since.
Thank you. Going back. There we go. Hello everyone, I'm Kayleigh, I work for JNCC and I'll be talking to you about assessing litter in UKCs and particularly addressing a few of the evidence gaps. So marine litter is a global problem with implications for marine life, economics and human health and well-being. The UK has committed to a range of international and national agreements to reduce litter in the marine environment, and these include through a sustainable development goal to reduce pollution, including marine litter, through the OSPAR Regional Action Plan to tackle litter, through the 25-year Environment Plan, which includes a goal on zero avoidable waste by 2050, and also for the UK Marine Strategy, which has a descriptor for good environmental status for litter in which levels are decreasing and that they don't pose a significant risk to marine life and the environment. So to monitor and assess marine litter, the UK uses the following indicators: plastic particles in fulmar stomachs, beach litter and seafloor litter. But for the seafloor litter indicator, currently only data from fisheries survey trawls are used for these assessments. And because identifying litter is not the main aims of these fisheries surveys, the monitoring has several limitations. So, for example, the monitoring is focused on offshore areas and soft sediments. Litter can pass through the trawls, and of course, trawling has environmental implications. And there's also a gap in our understanding on the distribution of abandoned, lost and discarded fishing gear in the UK, and data are already available to fill these two evidence gaps. So JNCC and Cefas collaborated together on two scoping projects. So the first on the use of seafloor imagery and monitoring assessing marine litter, and the second on abandoned, lost or discarded fishing gear. So I'll give a very brief overview of each project. So first on the imagery project, our key questions were: how does litter density, type and size differ between imagery data and trawls data? And could seafloor imagery offer an alternative or complementary solution to using trawl data for litter assessments? So trawl data was collated from the IC's database of trawl surveys, and then we selected 4 marine protected areas where imagery surveys had been conducted at the same time as the trawl surveys using sledge camera and drop camera. And then we selected a 5th case study in the Celtic Deep, where there was a survey conducted by an autonomous underwater vehicle by the National Oceanography Centre, because we wanted to look at AUV data as well. And if any imagery hadn't already been analysed for litter in previous analyses, we used the imagery annotation software Biggle to annotate the litter, and then compared the data between the imagery data and trawls data. So here are just some images of litter that was identified on the sea floor. There's things like pliers, plates, bottles, ropes, nets, litter everywhere. Overall, 859 litter items were detected over 8.7 kilometres squared. And you can see from this figure that the estimated litter density from the trawls is substantially lower than from the stills, videos, and AUV stills. So the trawls are missing a lot of the litter that's on the seafloor. And the problem is a lot worse than we think. Just to note, for the stills estimates, we had two estimates of litter density because a combination of systematic and opportunistic sampling approaches are used. But the AUV stills method is considered the most accurate because stills are taken systematically along a transect route. In terms of litter type, substantially more plastic was found in the trawls than the stills and the videos, but more miscellaneous items are found in the stills and videos because items are harder to identify because you can't visually inspect them, so that is a downside of using imagery. And imagery also detected more glass and metal because the trawls are less likely to dislodge these heavier items. And then in terms of litter size, the distribution of litter size was similar between trawls and stills, but substantially more small items were detected in the stills, simply because smaller items can pass through the fishing net mesh from the trawls. So the key findings from this study are that current assessments substantially underestimate the amount of litter on the sea floor, because a lot of litter is missed by the fisheries survey trawls. Analysing imagery supports the collect once used many times principle and recommend that imagery is analysed for litter as a standard. And benthic imagery could help fill evidence gaps and improve reporting on seafloor litter. And then just to give a very brief overview of the second project on abandoned, lost and discarded fishing gear. Just to note, I'm presenting this project on behalf of Ellen Last, who's the project manager, but unfortunately couldn't be here today. But the key questions were, where is abandoned, lost and discarded fishing gear found in the UK? What and where are the priority areas for action, and what are the potential causes? So a range of projects were identified from around the UK and data on abandoned, lost and discarded fishing gear was collected. And then this was mapped on a UK-wide scale using a gridded analysis to count the survey effort, and the potential causes were also mapped, and any possible correlations were assessed. So this is the survey effort around the UK, with dark blue showing greater survey effort. As you can see, it's quite substantial. And this is a kernel density plot that shows the estimated density of abandoned, lost and discarded fishing gear in the UK. So as you can see, there's hotspot areas in Pembrokeshire, Cornwall and Devon, Dorset and North Norfolk. So these are the priority areas where action should be undertaken. The density is low around Scotland, but this could be due to gaps in data in the region. And then this is a similar graph for beach, abandoned, lost and discarded fishing gear. And it shows a similar picture, except there isn't a hotspot in North Norfolk, which is interesting because that was a hotspot for seafloor litter. In terms of potential causes of abandoned, lost and discarded fishing gear, the high-density areas and hotspot areas overlapped with industry-related infrastructure associated with renewables and oil and gas, such as pipelines and wells, and it also overlapped with shipwrecks and areas where there's potential fishing gear conflicts, so where there's overlap between mobile fishing gear and static fishing gear, and this is because these causes like to cause snagging of the fishing gear. And then in some finer scale regions, the high density areas of abandoned, lost and discarded fishing gear overlapped with reefs, such as in the Canyons Marine Conservation Zone, which is shown here where there's presence of cold water coral reefs. And then in terms of the impacts, crustaceans, pink sea fans, mussels and seals were the most common species found entangled in abandoned, lost and discarded fishing gear. So of all the marine animals found dead in seafloor, abandoned, lost and discarded fishing gear, a bit of a mouthful, 37% were spider crabs, and then for beach gear, 32% were pink sea fans and 27% were mussels. And then half of all seal entanglements were associated with nets. However, it was difficult to determine whether a lot of these entanglements were from abandoned, lost and discarded fishing gear or from active gear. So that is a brief run through of each of those two projects. But just looking at the current status of marine litter, the UK has not achieved good environmental status for litter. The 2023 Quality Status Report states that marine litter levels do remain high despite some signs of improvement. Beach litter levels remain high with plastic items predominating, but there has been a decline overall. Seafloor litter is widespread across the region. 51% of beach North Sea formers have over the threshold of 0.1 grams of plastic in their stomachs. And just to note that plastic consumption has actually increased to record levels. So it's clear that more needs to be done to address this issue. So it's clear that although we need to enhance the evidence base to improve assessments and knowledge to inform targeted actions, such as by identifying regions where action should be undertaken, we also need to work together to develop innovative solutions and innovative solutions to reduce waste and reduce litter entering the marine environment. So the UK Circular Plastics Network are one of Innovate UK's networks that are connecting stakeholders for innovation throughout the plastics value chain. And so if you're interested in getting involved, please email Denise Goldsmith at this email address. She's also online. Or you can contact me and I can put you in touch. And thank you to all the amazing people and organisations and volunteers that contributed to these projects, and thank you all for listening.
I don't know whether that was a good news story or a bad news story. It was fantastic to hear about that level of innovation and to be able to get that, those new levels of data. It was heartbreaking to hear about the levels of plastic in our seas, which I know is something we're all aware of. I'm now going to hand over to Matt Frost, who works at Plymouth Marine Laboratory, but today is also wearing his chair of the UK National Decade Committee.
That's it. Great, thank you. Good morning. So firstly, thank you for the organisers for inviting me. What I've worked out, by the way, is sometimes when you hold up how long you've got left, the times are different. So I'm going to choose whoever gives me longest. Failing that, I'll leave my glasses off and ignore you altogether, but there we go. So thank you, organisers. It's really great to be here and lovely to see so many people. I haven't been here for a little while, and it's great to see lots of familiar faces and be back meeting in person, so really excited. What I want to do for this session now is really take a look at a different scale, and what I've really loved about this session is we've talked about sort of very, we just heard about bits of very targeted research. We've heard about the sort of local regional stuff that Bob talked about. We've heard about OSPAR, which is more that international regional approach. What I want to do now is really zoom right out and look at what's happening globally, which means essentially I'll mention assessments, which is just bad news, but is a bigger scale, so sorry about that. But what I really want to do is introduce you to the UK National Decade Committee, which I chair. And actually this is a call to action, and you've heard some of the other speakers say that one of the key things here is when there is action, we can make a difference. That's where the hope comes in. So this is what this is. It's a call to action, and I hope as a result of this, lots of you will get in touch. So, as I said, in terms of the global picture, there are these assessments. We've heard about, OSPAR, one of the regional assessments. There are these assessments that happen at a global level. So here's some examples. So you've got the IPCC assessments that come out. And you've also got the World Ocean Assessments as part of the regular process. So as you can see here, I'll just read this quote. The first World Ocean Assessment, which was back in 2015, warned that many areas of the ocean had been seriously degraded. The second one came out 2022 and said the situation has not improved. So as I said, when you start bringing all this evidence together globally, unfortunately, it's still not great news. And some of you may have seen this, this new paper that came out literally a few weeks ago in Nature. And rather worryingly, what it shows is that through all these assessments, we're capturing a lot of these pressures, but actually, we're missing a lot of them as well, particularly around industrial activity, around fishing and other things. We're just not capturing all of the impacts on the ocean, which means, sorry to have to say this, but the situation could actually be more challenging than we thought. So the question is now, what are we going to do about all this? Do we just do assessments so we can all say, that's not very good, and then just carry on as normal? Of course not. We want to do something about it. So in 2015, these 17 Sustainable Development Goals were agreed by the United Nations. And essentially, this isn't legislation, but this is a political framework. It's high-level ambition. It's saying, what do we want to do to live on our planet sustainably? And the key one of these is Sustainable Development Goal 14, which is life below water. And that is associated with a whole range of targets. And this is something that's put out there that we internationally can sort of buy into, if you like, and aim to improve things. Now, the message of this slide is that, yes, Sustainable Development Goal 14 is the one around the ocean, but actually the ocean flows through all of them, all 17 Sustainable Development Goals. If we want to address things like poverty and hunger, the ocean is absolutely key to that. So don't think that just because there's an SDG 14, all the others are irrelevant. Actually, the ocean, as we heard right at the beginning, and I think it was Gemma who mentioned about no blue, no green. So SDG 14, but it's actually all the SDGs that the ocean is relevant to. So in order to stimulate action on this, the UN proclaimed the decade for the ocean. So this is the decade of the ocean for sustainable development, 2021 to 2030, and the vision of this ocean decade is the science we need for the ocean we want. And this is really about transformative ocean science solutions. So I won't go through all of this slide because you can see here, you've got the 10 challenges, one ocean, as has been pointed out, not oceans, one ocean, 10 challenges, and we've got all of these aims and goals that we want to meet through this ocean decade. And as I said, what this really is about is it's looking at these assessments, it's looking at all the aims and targets and saying, well, what are we going to do about it? That's basically what we're asking in this ocean decade. Now, in terms of the types of actions, you can see here on the break, I'm going to put my glasses on because I can't see my own slide here. But you can see here at the bottom, there's a whole load of actions that you can actually get involved in or propose yourself if you want to be part of this ocean decade. So we have programs which tend to be large scale, decadal, multi-year, and involve a lot of countries normally. You can have projects which are shorter, 2 to 3 years, and you can propose projects to the UN. I'll go into how you do this a bit more in a minute. Often linked programs, but not always. Activities. So I don't know if any of you have been involved in these, but you can run a conference or a workshop or an exhibition or lots of things like that and actually get endorsement from the UN to feed in. Because what this Ocean Decade is trying to do is bring us all together globally and capture and inspire solutions and science and research and lots of other things that can feed in to addressing all the issues we have. And then there's contributions. That can be in kind, it can be financial, but I'll explain a little bit more in a minute. So in terms of the UN actually rolling this out, what they've asked is for each country to establish its own decade committee. So this is the committee that I chair. This is the committee meeting here. This was our first in-person meeting, which happened at the FCDO office down in Whitehall. And you can see here that one of the things about this committee is we didn't want just, it's not a sort of homogenous group. It's not just a bunch of academics or something like that. We used the whole of society approach, and we brought lots of people together from different sectors, different experience, early career, mid, senior, the rest of it. I don't know how many of the committee are here today. I know Emma here, Emma McKinley, I saw her earlier. She's on the committees. Talked to her as well, but yeah, this is the committee that has been set up really to act as a focal point for the UN, for the UK, but also our job, and why I'm here now, is to inspire you to get involved, to say, come and speak to us if you think, you know what, I'd really like my science or my educational work or whatever I'm doing to actually feed in at the global level. At the moment, there are 30, I think there might be 39 now, national decade committees. So the other thing we do is we work with the other decade committees. There's a meeting in Barcelona in April, which I'll be at. Oh no, they both say 2 minutes. Oh no. Right, okay. And I'm working with the Indian committee and the Brazil committee on that. So it's also, if you really want to liaise with other people, it's a great group to be involved with. In terms of what the UK is doing at the moment, what you've got here is, I won't go through this in detail, but you can see that there are 3 large programs being led out of the UK. There's actually 4, because Plymouth Marine Laboratory, where I work, is leading one, and we're just getting that changed on the website. We've got a number of projects, contributions. OSPAR is actually contributing to the UN decade, so the QSR is feeding into that global level in terms of action. So I hope this is showing you that there's lots going on from the UK, but there's also lots of scope to get involved. This is my last slide. Thank you both. So just to finish off, why would you do this? Why would you get engaged? Well, there's a number of reasons. Firstly, because it's a part of a collective global effort to meet the vision. As we keep hearing today, the decade is all about action, and we can't just sit back and hear bad news. I've got lots of experts in this group. We've got lots of people with ideas, solutions, so please get involved and get endorsement by the UN. You get to use the logo, you get to say you're working for the UN, get that recognition for what you're doing. High visibility, as I said, you can get to use the logo, they'll put whatever you're doing on their website, so people from all over the world can find out what you're proposing. What that should then lead to is an increase in collaboration. So we've got things like somebody's running the Early Career Ocean Professionals group from the UK. They're working across the world now, because once it's there in that UN system, people are getting in touch from all over the world and saying, how can we work together to address these issues? Create new connections, new sources of support. But finally, just to finish off, really, as I said, it's to support the Ocean Decade vision. We have issues, yes, they're local, yes, they're regional. Ultimately, it's one ocean, and we need to address this globally. We need to collaborate globally across sectors, across disciplines, across borders, across countries, in order to deliver the Ocean Decade vision, which is the science we need for the ocean we want. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Matt. That really was a call to arms, wasn't it? So do follow through on that. That was quite inspiring. And now for our last speaker of this session, Caroline Carr, who's going to talk to us around the clean Humber and pollution challenges and blue sky thinking in relation to that.
Thank you, Dave. Okay, how does that work? Brilliant. Thank you and welcome. And I'd just like to thank the Coastal Futures Committee for such an inspirational conference. It's been absolutely amazing. And what an experience to be here. I'm wondering who sat in the seat where Darwin sat. Has anyone crossed that thought yet? First of all, I'm used to being out in the sea. I'm not used to doing this, so please bear with me. So, what an incredible place to share our passions for the future and for the changes that we need to make to our world. So I'm Caroline Carr. I'm born in Grimsby, and I'm proud to be a Grimbarian. So thank you, Benj, for introducing Grimsby yesterday. I'm proud to be a Humbarian. So a lot of people associate the Humber with this dirty, smelly place. We're a meld of industry. So we've got shipping, we've got ferries, we've got factories. We take 20% of the water catchment from the country comes out through the Humber. Okay, and here, and I've got to just look at that because that is just phenomenal. So that is the view from my house, 2 minutes walk to the beach, and that's the Humber. Does that surprise anybody? We've got salt marsh there. It's absolutely fantastic. Okay, so my story today is a little bit about how the place I work and love is being influenced by pollution. Okay, right. So hands up, who went to the beach as a child? Okay, how much? Wave more, higher if you did lots. 2 hands if you did more. Who swam in the sea? Who got covered in mud? Who ate cockles? Oysters? Okay, fantastic. So this is my tribe here. So you might not have found much of Clean Humber on the internet, but outdoor learning schools has been my passion for 10 years. And I've got an outdoor education degree, environmental science degree, and a passion for getting kids and children outside into the environment and learning about it. These are our future. Okay? And we've got, you can see, we've got such a range there. We've got women who swim in the Humber. We've got paddleboarding. We do beach schools. We do environmental education. Okay, it's been my life completely. If you ask me what my EDI is at the moment, it's unemployed, nearly homeless, and financially in a mess, really. Outdoor learning schools has folded, okay, because of the situation. So that's the bad, but there is some good coming later. And I'd like to, at this point, just thank Helen for front-loading completely with your EA data, because you have saved me. And I mean that literally. So what about today then? So in the past, you've all swam. Okay, who's got children now? Grandchildren. Okay, so what about today? Do you take them in the sea? Right, how often? Just wave. Right. Is it a regular thing? What's stopping you at the moment? Okay. So I put some Slido things on, but lots of questions on Slido, so we don't need those. So at this point, I just want to take a moment to admire our Jason Carlisle's artwork here, and I hope that resonates with some of the topics we've been talking about today. So if anyone would like a copy of that, please do contact me. Okay. Right, so pollution challenges that I've suffered here, really, with outdoor learning schools is the sewage overspills, okay, the contaminations from the land, and lots of the topics that we've had coming in through already about what's causing the pollution in our area. Okay, right. So, what did I do? And I'm just going to read what I did from here. Okay. So, after 10 years of delivering highly successful business working in and on the seas, beaches, and salt marshes with a whole range of children, clients, young and old, vulnerable, schools, people, friends, and family, we hit a tidal wave of a problem, and sub-school and environmental beach schools had no choice but to stop. Right? And it wasn't COVID. So COVID was a breeze. We had all those people coming out locally. We had funded government activities. We did half clubs. It was absolutely fantastic. COVID, we survived. But after that, with the changes in how things are reported, what we found was that we were getting sewage reports nearly every single week. So, the public facing, we're looking at our sewage reports, sewage overspills for the Humber, for Cleethorpes Beach were constant. So we've had 18 months of this. Okay, and then what do you do as a business? So do you send your children to the beach to go in the sea, in the mud. My children eat the sand. Yeah. Okay. Do you send them to do litter picks when the litter on the beach isn't the plastic and the marine industry stuff? It's used wet wipes that have come out of the sewage system. It's sanitary products. Okay, and that's what was happening on our beach. So, hence the quite serious campaign we did, and we became, instead of an outdoor environmentalist, an educator, I was more of a campaigner. And I don't like that. It's terrible. So at that point, this was a really big problem. So it's like, right, I need to take action. And we wrote to Anglian Water. And he was very aware of me, Peter Simpson. I'd been on TV. And his response was really, really good, eventually. So I got data off him. As a scientist, I wanted to try and triangulate data. So the stuff that I've tried to build on is the Cefas Against Sewage. The app has been our go-to all the time. The work they do is phenomenal at raising awareness to people. Okay. However, then you've got the environmental agency data, which I'm going to come to. And then also the overspill data from the maps that Anglian Water put out as well. And some of that all comes too late. So here we go. Okay. So for me, the data on the ground has been sewage. The EA data for our year just before Christmas was good, if not excellent. Okay, and that is very, very small there. But if you look here, right, our water quality is nearly excellent. And it's been like that all year, bearing in mind that that's only the bathing season. If I'd have known that every single day, I wouldn't have cancelled everything. So I'm looking for help, really, for a change. How are we doing for time? I can't see. Oh, no, good, okay. A change in how this data is accessible, okay? So, because I want to come away and find things that aren't just a poo with a red cross, right? When the EA data that comes through to the local council is that the water's good, but that doesn't come to us, and it doesn't come to us as a general public. So your communities are missing out because that data's not there, okay? Right, so 2 maps, same day. Cefas Against Sewage, Environment Agency. All right, okay? You can ask me questions later. Lots of positives which we've seen about the Humber as well, but what I really do want to share with you before is the action that Anglian Water have responded to me that they are going to do. So they have actually said, sewage spill is too much, it needs to stop, right? And for them to be honest and to cut the crap and say, yes, it's too much, is really good. So thank you, Anglian Water, for that. They're going to update their EDM monitoring system to generate real-time reporting so that it's better. Okay. And also, they're going to look at creating new innovative approaches. So, more how you deal with the water on the land rather than the sewage overtanks, which are just too big. Okay. So, basically, I'm looking at more coordination so that all this data is more readily available to the general public and my kids on the beach, so we know on that day, yes, the water is good, okay? Beach aware systems are in place with local authority, but there's no signage for it. The EA do this fabulous poster that you can print off that says, our water is good, 2 stars. It's a little A4 document. I need it to be fine and fancy and all singing and all dancing, okay? And pollution forecasts to be not colour-coded red. If it's not a pollution incident, why is it appearing that way? Okay. And ultimately, sewageless seas. So I hope that's all okay. And then finally, so this is what I want to go back to. I don't want to be here talking to people. I want to be doing, and hopefully that will happen. Okay? And thank you, and that's my contact. Please do, you can't find me very much on social media. Clean Humber has a Facebook page, but please remember that email, cleanhumber@gmail.com. And if you've got any information or you want to ask any more questions about what we've done to try and action this, then please do get in touch. Okay, thank you.
That was a real call to arms, wasn't it? That really showed starkly how the use of good evidence and good science can lead to actions on the ground and can make a real difference. So thank you very much, Caroline. That was, to go from a global scale to that local scale, I think was quite humbling for many of us. I'd like to invite all the speakers to your numbered chairs. There we go. We've got a bit of time for Q&A, and hopefully it's been busy on the Slido. It's really hard to see people up there, so if you've got a question upstairs...
Oh, do you think
you want some water?
Yes, please. I think I need about vodka.
No, it's fine.
I enjoyed your talk, it was really good.
Yeah, so you've got...
I need to show you about wet wipes.
Oh,
Wet
yeah.
wipes and seaweed. It's
Yeah.
Thank you.
Would you like some
Thank you.
water?
I make
Right.
one, thank you.
Okay, folks. We're going to do the Q&A. We've got the Q&A session. We're going to run past 11 o'clock just a little bit, but your refreshment break won't be reduced too much. Start with questions in the room. And if I can see somebody waving up there, so because I can see you, I'm going to ask for the mic to come over that way.
A general question.
Yeah. Oh, my
Hello,
apologies. We'll do
Kayleigh
this one
Robinson,
first.
Marine Management Organisation and University of Liverpool. So my question's about working across scales because I know some of you, I've done regional sea work and I've also now worked at much smaller scales. And I think for me, the power of this morning's session was that there's passion and there's importance of all the work that all of you are doing at those different scales. I don't think that it's one scale fixes everything. But what I wonder is, do we need a way in this country or in any part of the world to be more coordinated across scales and try and make efficiencies about where is it the best thing to, should we act locally for this issue, but internationally for this issue? I kind of feel like we're just doing that anyway, and maybe that's okay. I think some issues should be tackled internationally, but many locally. I guess I'd like to ask the panel members, do you think there is a need to coordinate, to prioritise what we should do at different scales and to link up again across scale, or do you think that we should just crack on?
Thank you very much.
I guess I'd be interested to hear from Bob, maybe from Christina or Dominic, and maybe from someone who could perhaps speak at the more local scale too.
Okay, thank you very much. And I think that's a good question. That speaks very much to the main theme of this, around how do we respond to the latest evidence and assessments to drive action. So I'll take some reflections, and
Okay,
Bob, seeing as you were
let me-
named first.
Yeah, okay. I was involved in the North Sea ministerial meetings in the late 80s and 90s where the QSRs really came on stream. And they were very closely coupled, as Dominic's pointed out, to the political process. So those are very high profile ministerial meetings which made a whole suite of changes to dumping and sewage dumping in the sea, dumping of sort of large objects, fishing. It transformed the scenario, which enabled OSPAR to come along and actually do that work. So there, at Dominic's regional scale, sure, you need effective ministerial action translated into the government and then filtered down. At the scale I was talking at, and to take Kayleigh's talk, ghost netting, there are a number of groups in the southwest that go around physically picking up ghost nets off the seabed, doing the dance on legal things with the MMO, which is a wonderful thing to behold. But interesting, the SEAL squad in the southwest regularly record the number of seals, this is citizen science, number of seals that are entangled in netting. It's about 100 seals a year, and often they've got marks, and so they can actually be identified. It's a sort of fairly standard number. And the thought has often struck me, well, if you actually targeted the ghost netting squad who actually like going out on boats and taking stuff on the beach, off the beach, would that make a difference to the number of seals that get entangled? And it's making the link between those two that is intriguing little challenge of personalities, I have to say as well. I hope that sort of answers your question.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Dominic.
thank you. And really, really good and relevant question. I think we've seen from the talks today how it is so important to coordinate and collaborate at all those levels. I think you're right, Leonie. It happens because it happens and because you have people who are interested in doing the right thing. But you have those very different scales. Bob's right that at the OSPAR level, at sort of national levels, you have that sort of need to influence the politicians, and they will always want evidence to sort of back up those decisions. Working together at the OSPAR scale, we can bring together the sort of collective resources, the collective ambition. I mean, what's nice in OSPAR is you'll have the more ambitious countries dragging the less ambitious countries along behind them because they don't want to be the ones at the back of the queue. So you can then generate a greater sense of purpose. I think my reflection would be, is that the actions are often better done at the local level because you have the people that really care about their environment. So it's a combination of that kind of high-level political sharing resources to get things done. We're all short of resources, but if you can pool those resources, deliver the evidence that then supports the action at the local level, I think that's the ideal situation.
Thank you, Dominic.
Yeah.
Matt?
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to come in it from the other way, the evidence gathering as well, because, and Leonie, I would say we definitely need better coordination. One of the issues is, if you look at the amount of scientific research and expertise we've got in the UK, it's fantastic, but actually it's a resource issue, and Plymouth Marine Laboratory, I worked at, just there alone, we have about 15 people involved in the World Ocean Assessment regular process. I'm trying to get them involved in the UN National Decade to do stuff through that. We've got the Marine Climate Change Impacts Partnership, where we're working with 200-300 scientists, gathering evidence for the UK. I could keep going through all of these different examples. Bob, you're working with scientists down in the Southwest, for example. There's a limited resource there, and for me, it's that collect once, use many times philosophy, and we have to be much better at working with our science and experts to gather that evidence and make sure it feeds in a very coordinated way at these different levels, because otherwise, eventually, you're kind of overloading that community. So that would be, better coordination all along.
Thank you. Thank you. Caroline, did you have a...
Just really about that coordination again. So, because there's lots of information and data out there, and it needs to work collectively. So, I think one of the themes of the conference has been about this collaboration. I think that's really, really important.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, can I just add?
Of course you may.
Yeah, just for the abandoned, lost and discarded fishing gear project that you mentioned, Bob. Yeah, so a lot of data was used from the organisations that you mentioned, including in the Southwest, and kind of putting all that together to give a UK-wide picture. So there is a report on that which will be published and shared with all the data contributors and also to policymakers. So yeah, but I agree, better coordination is needed. Thank you.
Christina.
I think I will perhaps support what Leonie said at the end, that we need to crack on. There is always this kind of delay that, we need to find new collaborations, but there is quite a lot of collaboration already in place. We need to build on those, and there are some actions that are local actions. There are some actions that need more kind of regional actions because we're an island, and there is a lot of influence that comes from outside into the UK waters. So I do really think that we need to crack on with the stuff that we already have.
Thank you. So I think there's a collective theme there about the need to sort of enhance the networking, the collaboration, but actually focus around some of that localized delivery as well. So thank you for that first question, which sort of touches on that whole how do we translate evidence through into action. Next question. Who else has got a question? I'm a bit blinded by the lights here.
Yes.
Is there anything coming off the Slido? Yeah? Well, Okay, we'll go to that gentleman first and then to Slido. Yep.
Okay. Thank you. Tom Hooper. The question is really aimed at, I think, Christina, and it's, you look at the state of nature type reports, it's always the confidence for mammals and seabirds really good, and this is around the benthic impacts, and we always rely to a great extent on the pressures type modelling. And when, Matt, you were talking about short-term projects, and always the trouble with short-term projects, we don't see the kind of longer-term trends, and it's that trade-off between the huge expense of monitoring, getting down there, and having confidence versus the reality of what modelling can tell us. So here's the question: is where's that perfect? Where's the comfort zone really in how we invest in long-term monitoring, which gives us confidence that the interactions that we're doing are having the desired impact. And my challenge really is I feel that we are too driven by the short-term projects and not enough. MPA or outside MPA, it doesn't really matter. Not enough of the long-term studies. Thanks.
Thank you. So Christina, that's a reflection on
yes,
the
no,
worth
that's,
of long-term
yeah,
monitoring.
that's a brilliant question. Yes, long-term thinking is very much a rarity. Monitoring, targeted monitoring to reflect, the progress on the trends and what we are measuring is very important. We have a huge, large sea area, so we cannot have monitoring everywhere, but there is good models, and the models actually give you a very good sense of directions and trends, and this monitoring obviously need to be ground truth and tested. But there is this kind of need to invest in this long-term thinking to address the problem, not as a delay to take action. Action needs to be taken now. We have sufficient evidence that things are not well, and you have what I present you very briefly some of the results we have. Different biodiversity components measured by completely different data sets are giving the same message. Things are not very well. You remember the grey highlights where actually not enough data was available to run the assessments. So you need this long-term thinking about where the data should be targeted, monitoring should be targeted, but they need to take action now. And this action now will also generate what else is needed. But it's a combination of both. My response when people say, oh, we never have enough confidence, perhaps we need to collect more evidence, I say, well, data is full of imperceptions, and this is live, but this shouldn't delay trying to make things better. I think sometimes there is a danger that we take nature for granted, and we shouldn't do this anymore.
Thank you, Christina. Question from...
yeah, this is a question from online. It's short and sweet, which asks, when will we have enough evidence? And that's for anyone.
There's a very quick answer to that. There's never enough evidence. Never, 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 ever will there be enough evidence. So unless we act in a certain sense, because there's the massive excuse. There's a report, a study, a survey, puts things off, classic civil servant device. Report comes out, not enough evidence. You've only got to sort of read it once or twice to see the pattern.
Matt's clearly keen to get in on this.
Yeah, I'll tell you why, because I was asked this. I was giving evidence to a parliamentary committee a few years ago, and it was around MPAs and everything. And they asked exactly the same question, don't we need to collect more evidence? And I just said, you know what, in 2000 there was a report, I think it was Dan Foley published it, and it said that we were one of the best studied areas in the world in terms of what we know about our marine environment, and yet we were still saying, we can't do it, we need more. As Bob said, you'll never have enough. We have enough. We know what we need to do in that sense. We'll always need more science, more research, but we've got enough evidence now to know what we need to do. We just need to get on and do it.
Mm-hmm. That's what I mean. Brilliant. Thank you. Questions from the room? Over here. It's a long hike for the mic.
The collective question.
Hello, Elaine Hayes, Chief Exec, Plymouth Sound National Marine Park. All of you in your talks sometimes directly, sometimes indirectly alluded to the power of technology. And what I'd really like to know from the panel is how can we turbocharge the depth of our understanding to make better decisions by use of digital technologies?
I think I'm going to look to Kayleigh to take this one.
So for the seabed litter project, Cefas are currently working on using artificial intelligence to identify litter from the imagery, so we don't have to have our marine support officers going through thousands and thousands of images trying to identify litter. So that would be one area of focus, yeah, artificial intelligence.
Okay, any other reflections on that?
Yeah, I mean, all I can say is, yeah, once again, we're developing AUV technology with using AI that can actually go through the water and track out plastic pollution. Technology is just a massive thing at the moment, which is developing quickly. The issue will be that as we gather more and more data and more evidence, that also has issues. Because, more data is great, but you have to analyze it and process it and understand it. But yeah, we're using a lot of technology.
Okay, another question in the room? I can't. You're going to have to really wave your arms upstairs. I can't.
This one.
Oh, there's a lady there.
I'm Sally Campbell from the Isle of Arran. I'm going to be a bit controversial, I expect. We had a politician here yesterday who crept away as soon as she'd done her bit. And it seems to me the lack of political will to get on with what we all know needs to be done is frankly infuriating. And nobody really is saying, where are the politicians? Why aren't they here hearing what we're saying? So there's a bit of me that says, we all know what needs to be done. I've been a marine scientist for, well, you can tell. And every time I come to Coastal Futures, we know what needs to be done, but it doesn't bloody change. So how do we get really strategic, long-term thinking with politicians, supported by the infrastructure and the money? How much are we all prepared to pay in our taxes to ensure that we actually push this agenda forward? Because in the end, it's up to us. Where are we? Why aren't we out demonstrating? So I think what I'm trying to say to you is, how do we get politicians actively involved and not just doing a speech that's been prepared at number 10?
Thank you. I'm not entirely sure that needs a response. I think you've had your response. But I'm going to look to Dominic.
Thank you. I can, now that I don't work at DEFRA anymore, I can actually speak a bit more freely. And I think it came up in the sort of earlier presentations of that. Actually, sometimes it takes a crisis, or it takes for something to be in the newspapers to catch the politicians' attention. I always point back to we did a very small impact on the marine environment, but banning microbeads. It was because the Daily Mail was running it. It's nothing to do with the evidence that we had in the department. It was just lucky that we had an evidence programme that was delivering results at the same time that the Daily Mail, Daily Express, I can't remember, one of those newspapers was saying, we need to ban these things. And that's what gets the politicians' attention. So I'm not saying we all need to go out and demonstrate, but you do need to find those ways of sort of making it in their interest to do something about it. And their interest is voters. That's their main audience. So you need the evidence to support what you're doing. But you do need that sort of action, that raising it, local issues. If you can raise local issues, that gets the politicians interested. I completely agree. We have the evidence looking at our QSRs over the years, they're saying the same thing. It's just we're saying it better with more evidence. But the story hasn't changed, so I completely support what you're saying. And to be fair to OSPAR, and you know, OSPAR isn't me, OSPAR is the countries and the contracting parties that come there. They've said, you know, we've done the monitoring and assessment thing. When are we going to start to move towards measures and actions and doing that? So there is an intention to do that, but if I was sitting in DEFRA still, I'd be saying resources, you know, haven't got enough staff, haven't got enough time. So, but, yeah.
All right. I'd like to ask Bob to come in on this one. He's been champing at the bit here. So, and then
Sally, thank you for the question, because it's really, it kind of gets to the heart of quite a lot of frustrations in I think the audience in general, in rather across this community. You won't need me to tell you that it's been a remarkably frustrating decade and a couple of years. The budgets of all of our agencies have been cut extraordinarily, significantly. It's not just the environment, it's everywhere. So in a certain sense, there's a very clear message for anyone who's voting in the coming election. And it's actually worse than that, because now, Dominic, of course, following XR and various things like that, the government's new and actually active legal measures to stop people demonstrating, so it has got significantly worse. So if anyone's toying with the idea of who to vote for, then anyone else would be better. Couldn't be anything else.
Thank you, Bob. Thank you very much.
Can I add, David?
I'd like to...
Dave, can I add a little bit? Sorry.
Of course
Sorry.
you can.
Sally,
Last word.
just to help a little bit there on that. So, as Dominic said, a lot of the issues is that within organisations you can't have a voice. You've got data and facts, but you can't do protesting. It's against it, isn't it? So with me, Anglian Water have engaged really positively with me because I hashtagged them in all the protests. Yeah. I've also done that with North East Links Council. I've done it with Cefas against sewage. And I think that if organisations, and the MPs, of course, right? So our MPs were, they voted for the changes in Parliament that, enable companies to dump more sewage. Parliament isn't following their guidelines for chasing up companies that do it a lot, like Anglian Water. Yeah. So even though the water quality is good, there's some issues with that. And I think we need to flag up politically good stories, so where things happen that are good, and actions that we want to happen, and to use the power of the people really to share those stories. And the same, the Guardian and the press. The Guardian write fabulous things, and if that shares your story and helps you, put that into the political agenda, then that's what we should be doing. Yeah. So that's an action.
Yeah. Fantastic. And that was a lovely question, statement to end on. But I think it shows the motivation and the energy and the enthusiasm that really does start to take evidence into action. I'd like you all to just quickly join me to thank our speakers for 6 excellent presentations.